We're going to go inside ancient Egypt at GPS Films along with Dr. Zahi Hawass. Zahi Hawass has been described as the Indiana Jones of Egypt's archaeologists, and he is. He's the director of antiquities, and if you've watched any programs on ancient Egypt, you have seen Dr. Hawass. An interesting character in his own right, a wonderful guy to spend time with, and somebody that is about to take us together through some of the most amazing historical landmarks the earth has to offer. 21st century Cairo. A place King Tutankhamun could never have imagined. When King Tut walked this land, there was no city here. It was all just sand, the eastern edge of the vast Sahara Desert. But 3,350 years after King Tut, Cairo is a huge world capital, crowded and dominated by two powerful forces: the tourism that brings people from all over the globe to this amazing ancient city, and of course, Islam. The word of the Prophet Muhammad was spread across North Africa more than 1,000 years ago. Today, Cairo claims more mosques than any city in the world, more call to prayer, and more minarets and more Muslim voices than any single city on earth. Islamic Egypt is now being left behind as we travel back in time. Cairo no longer exists, and it is now that we are confronted with the true size and scale of Egypt's ancient history. We stand very close to the year 2000. 1,300 years ago, the Prophet Muhammad launched Islam. 2,000 years ago, Jesus lived. And just before that, Cleopatra reigned in the last of Egypt's great dynasties. 1,350 years before Cleopatra, King Tut ruled all of Egypt. And 1,400 years before King Tut, the pharaohs of the oldest Egyptian kingdom began building the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx at Giza. That was 4,700 years ago. 2,700 years before Cleopatra. The pyramids stand at the beginning of Egypt's 3,000-year reign as Earth's leading civilization. The proportions of all of this are staggering, almost impossible to grasp. The three great pyramids stand as sentinel to the beginning of that civilization, with one towering over the rest. The largest of the three is the Great Pyramid, which was built here 4,700 years ago. It was to house the body of an old kingdom pharaoh by the name of Khufu. Now, this building was put together using 2 million 2-ton blocks of sandstone. Some of the blocks inside are as much as 15 tons. It still defies scientific explanation as to how they were exactly put in place. It rises 481 feet above the Giza Plateau, and for 4,700 years, it ranked as the world's largest man-made structure. And it is a structure still not fully known to the scientific world. Its passageways have been probed, its chambers revealed and robbed of the vast wealth that must have been in place there. But we're about to go inside with the greatest living historian of the pyramids, the one man who has devoted his life to their study. He's walking up the stairs right now, inside what is called the Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid. It is hot, the air is heavy, and his steps come slow, as do everyone's. But for Dr. Zahi Hawass, this is really living. It's a measured pace.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning. You don't want to be doing that every day. Egypt's director of antiquities climbed through the passageways with me, stooping and crawling and ultimately emerging from the low tunnel that brings you into the presumed burial chamber of the great king.
Whoa. That's the third chamber in the pyramid.
3 large chambers inside the most mysterious place on earth. And Dr. Zahi Hawass knows every rock, every seam, every crack, and will take us over the next hour on one of the greatest adventures imaginable, a thorough examination of ancient Egypt.
The pyramids particularly have been your life's work.
Yes.
What do you find to be the most astonishing thing about them?
You know, I lived in front of these pyramids for years. I got up in the morning every day. I see the pyramids on the sunrise and the pyramids on the sunset. What's amazing that every day I can see something new. Every day I feel different of yesterday. Every day I learn something more than before. That is the mystery and the magic of the pyramid. That freely you try to learn from them and you excavate around them. Every day there is something new.
The three Great Pyramids and the Sphinx. Many people think that that's all there is to the Giza Plateau, and for most tourists, that is what you see. But if you explore down under the pyramids themselves, in and around the pyramids, places that were buried in sand up until really not very long ago, you find that it is a full catacomb of tombs, all located under that sand as it's now been dug out. Dr. Hawass took us through part of it, and I got a chance to go through part of it on my own. An amazing tour into places that were not known by the traveling public simply because until recently nobody could go there. It really is all about sand. If the Sphinx could be buried in 50 feet of sand and completely lost dozens of times over in the past 4,700 years, imagine what happened to the smaller tombs, the passageways, the canals around the pyramids. Local guides took us into the passageways found underneath the sands all the way around all three of the major pyramids. And these are the last areas to be excavated in just the past 100 years, where they've gone into and underground these locations. They knew what they were like on top, but they didn't know what was down underneath until really Zahi Hawass and a few others have gone through each and every cavern location and discovered what was inside. And what was inside was very, very surprising. Because the digging revealed stones that indicated that the pharaohs, like King Tut, had visited these tombs more than 1,000 years after they were built, the tombs underscore just how long Egyptian history really is. Because these tombs had to be excavated out of the sand by King Tut or his immediate predecessors. They were already lost. They are closed to the public today. But we'll take a look inside. Look at this. Everything's still here. Now, it takes a moment to imagine King Tut and the people of his era coming into these cavernous tombs right here adjacent to the Great Pyramids. All of what you are looking at 1,000 years older than King Tut's time. So when he comes in here with people of the 18th dynasty, 3,200 years ago, he's looking at artifacts that are 900 to 1,000 years older than he is. So all of a sudden they come in, they find family members carved into the walls, children carved into the walls, a father, a mother, 4 children. The story of their life, killing of animals, text that really hasn't been utilized in any historical sense because these tombs are just now being studied for the first time. Look at the paint. Look how perfect it is from 4,000 years ago. The boats, the paddles, the painted individuals, all of this preserved because this was under the sands adjacent to the Great Pyramids. Take a look. These are things that people had not been able to see until the last 40 or 50 years when some photographs have been taken of this, but it has not been turned into any sort of museum place yet. I think one of the most frightening things that would have happened if you were coming in here as King Tut or anybody without any light, as you walked further into these tombs,
and are confronted by the entire family being carved into the wall. This is every family member. This is, in this particular case, all the women of the family. Here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 women. Children and grown women carved into the back of these tombs, still painted, still standing, every toe, every toenail. As they come into the tombs even further, what do they find? More women. So this tomb was dedicated to the women, female members of one particular family. We have more women carved into the walls, still standing with the story, of course, carved into the walls of their lives. Now, one of the least pleasant of the tasks. How deep is deep? How far is far? We're about to find out.
The ancient Egyptians, 4,700 years ago, dug straight down into burial places supposedly safe from tomb robbers. Of course, they never were.
Please tell me these stairs are sturdy. I think they are. What is this, an underground crypt of some sort? Yeah, just rough cut. Just a rough cut space. All the chisel markings still in place. You can see them on the ceiling, on the walls. Almost certainly the burial place for one of the female family members. I guess if not more.
It is possible that entire families were buried in these crypts, along with the gold and precious objects that all prominent ancient Egyptians took with them to the grave. Now we are left with just their story, painted here on the walls.
Also gives you an idea how beautiful and elaborate a thing like the Sphinx was when it was all completely painted like this on the exterior, because it was not a sandstone object like that. It was a brightly painted blue, yellow, brown.
It is overwhelming to try to take it all in, and then to realize right next door the work that must have been involved in creating the Sphinx 4,700 years ago. Then, 1,200 years later, the Sphinx had already been lost, and King Tut's great-grandfather, Thutmose, uncovered it and left a plaque, or a stela, as ancient Egyptians and Egyptians today refer to it. He left that plaque to tell the world of his spectacular discovery.
When he came here, the Sphinx was completely covered with sand. That hieroglyphic is telling us what I'm telling you. And he was hunting wild animals in summer. It was hot. He came and had a nap beside the Sphinx. The Sphinx came to him in dream and told him, "My son, Thutmose, I'm dying. The Sphinx, the sand is killing me. If you remove the sand away from me, I will make you the king of Upper and Lower Egypt."
This says that?
Exactly. I will make you the king of the two lands. Then what Thutmose did, he came and he took the sand away from the Sphinx. And he found that the old kingdom blocks were falling apart. He restored them back. Then he is the first archaeologist in the world.
So the world's first archaeologists were pharaohs of 3,400 years ago. They dug up the Sphinx. And the leading archaeologist of today will tell us more about the mysteries of that Sphinx when we come back. The Sphinx itself remains mysterious even today, and as cruise ship tourists or any tourists that take the bus tours in and around the Sphinx, you don't often get a chance to go right up close to it, certainly not to touch and see and feel what the Sphinx is all about. And very rarely do you get a personal guided tour that is as exceptionally well done as that of Dr. Hawass. Dr. Zahi Hawass is now about to explain to us exactly how the Sphinx was discovered and what it might have been about the day it was built. Few sites in the world have been as well studied as the Egyptian Sphinx, and probably no man in the history of the world knows the object as well as Dr. Zahi Hawass. For 30 years, he has studied every square inch of the man's head on the lion's body. We know that it is the face of the pharaoh Sephron. He is the son of Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid. Sephron built his own pyramid right next to his father's and nearly as big, but with no shafts or chambers inside. Instead, he had a giant rock outcropping carved to look like himself. It only took a few hundred years to then be buried in Sahara sand and literally removed from view. That was just a flash of time in Egyptian history. 200 years goes by very quickly here. We have seen how King Tut's great-grandfather dug it up and revealed it again to ancient Egypt 1,200 years after it was built. But a question has long been asked here. Is the Sphinx a solid object, or did it too contain treasure inside? Dr. Hawass says there was a legend about the animal's right paw.
You have many people all over United States and Europe and Japan who still believe that there is something underneath the right paw of the Sphinx. Stanford Research Institute in 1977, they came and they did make with radar. They proved that the Sphinx is a solid rock or a living rock. It was a rock that the ancient Egyptians changed that rock to have a face of a king and a body of a lion. But later, about 5 or 6 years ago, Florida State University, they came and they did with radar everywhere. Their work proved there is nothing.
So it is nothing but a marvel of craftsmanship, a huge statement to a king, and an object of interest to a boy king who made trips here 1,200 years after it was built. We are 500 miles north of King Tut's home, but he stood right here.
More than 3,000 years ago, this young golden boy, King Tut, who came to his rest house, and maybe he asked the people around him to come and look at the Sphinx. And he walked around the Sphinx. That could be something 100% it's happened.
Zahi Hawass knows it happened because of a remarkable discovery made just south of the Sphinx not long ago. Here at Saqqara, archaeologists found the tomb of the mysterious woman named Maya. She was a young woman who served as King Tut's wet nurse for many years. Ancient civilizations frequently breastfed rulers right up into their teenage years, and King Tut was no exception. Dr. Hawass took me through a tiny doorway where inside we found the hieroglyph in the tomb, a hieroglyph of a boy king with his surrogate mother.
Look at it carefully. This is the wet nurse. She is sitting. Who's sitting on her lap? Look, and he's a king. He's having the cobra.
He's got the cobra, right?
In the forehead.
Right.
He is wearing, but he is sitting because he took the throne when he was 9 years old. And she is nursing him. And he looks like a young boy. That is the beginning of this child, the golden child, the golden man that really, and this lady, her name is Maya. And look, this is the cartouche of Tutankhamun. Neb Khibrura. And you can see that he is sitting on her lap and with her hand just touching him.
Yes.
With love.
Right, yeah, you can
and
see.
affection. Because you know King Tut, his mother, died when she was delivering him. Kia.
So she really raised
Then
him.
she raised him.
Yeah, as his mother, really.
As his mother.
So this is the tomb of a noble person of the highest order, a surrogate mother to a king. Even Dr. Hawass has been shocked by what was found inside this tomb.
I never thought that a beautiful scene like this, of the wet nurse of Tutankhamun, to show the king, this is a unique scene that you have never seen it in any place at all.
This is a closed tomb. The public will never be allowed inside.
One of the reasons these tombs are not open to the public is because they worry about damage that can take place to the even artifacts that are along the walls like this, the hieroglyphs along the walls. We try not to touch them and not to even put fingerprints on here because archaeologists have yet to really pattern all this out in their work. But when you look at it, we wanted to take just a quick look at the paint and the color that remains on there 3,450 years after it was painted, and you look at Maya, this wet nurse from King Tut's era, and look at just how elegant and how beautifully she is carved into the wall of her own tomb. Take a look at this as you go into the actual tomb itself. You can see every chip mark still in here, every swing of the blade as they cut through the rock. I mentioned 100 feet back into the mountain itself. Let's climb down through here, a passageway designed to be too small for a fully grown, tall individual because they tried to make it difficult to bring anything out, certainly anything large. And you get inside the tomb itself and see again these cut marks on the wall. Look at that. Every swing of the blade that cut the stonework away as they continued to try to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the mountain. Take a look at this. Now these are things that get really, really, really strange as you proceed. It becomes passageway after passageway. Plus they're held up by these iron, what's that sound? Right there. Ooh, okay. It's all right. Oh, and the pits. And here, look, carved up above, cracked in half over the years. The actual tomb, the resting place, where Maya, this wet nurse, was actually laid to rest inside this space. By the time you make it down into here, I'll tell you, you know you've made a little bit of a trek.
Inside it is hot, humid, and fantastic. Just a small part of an ancient civilization that people long suspected was a jewel-encrusted fairyland packed with gold. But it was not until 80 years ago that we really knew that for sure. When we come back, the riches of King Tut, the magnificent scale of the Valley of the Kings, the temples at Karnak, the wealth in the Egyptian Museum, the mummies, the touring exhibit. I don't know if we'll have time to fit it all in. Now we get a chance to go up the Nile River, which means, of course, directly south. We're going to go 500 miles south of Cairo, up the Nile, into the area that was traditionally the headquarters, I guess you'd call it, the capital of ancient Egypt. Because I say headquarters simply because there were so many different cities that were utilized as capitals during that time. There was Thebes and Luxor and Karnak and areas in and around the Valley of the Kings, all of which served for periods of time as capitals to ancient Egypt. That's where the tombs are. This is where many of the temples left today still stand. And again, with Dr. Zahi Hawass, this is one of the most remarkable places that you can see on the earth. Cruise ships, incidentally, do take tours from the Red Sea side of Egypt, over in Hurghada, the 130-mile drive across the desert over to the Nile River so that you can take a look at the antiquities from that direction. Of course, you also get a chance to take a look at them if you're on a Nile River cruise, which stops at each and every one of those locations. One of the most amazing things that I myself have ever had the opportunity to see. 3,350 years ago, this was Egypt's capital, 550 miles to the south of Cairo. Thebes was the name of this city, and this was its centerpiece, an assortment of structures built over a period of several centuries. This is about 1,000 years newer than the pyramids. Understandably, it is hard to imagine the length of time that ancient Egypt existed.
Simply because it lasted so long, 3,000 years in all, Egyptian history is usually broken down into dynasties, each one comprising about 100 years. So therefore there are 30 Egyptian dynasties. Those dynasties are also broken down into 3 distinct groupings. There's the Old Kingdom, which is the period of time when they built the Great Pyramids. There's the Middle Kingdom, which was a flowering period for architecture and literature for the Egyptians. And there was the New Kingdom, where the great temples were built, like what you see right now, the huge temple complex at Karnak.
It was built before, during, and after King Tut's reign, a colossus of pillars, statues, and hieroglyphs. The ceilings inside this temple were 82 feet high. This amazing palatial structure was a house of worship and a palace for kings and queens, and an ongoing building project which kept the public very busy. Whether it was this or the elaborate tombs across the river, the average Egyptian did not have to look very far to find work. Whether it was building new temples or even tearing the faces off previous kings. No one really knows what this looked like as a functioning city 3,000 years ago. For that matter, nobody really knows what the pyramids looked like in their day. Robbers stripped away anything of value years and years ago, and that wasn't the only problem. Whether it was in tombs like up in the pyramids, or if it was at temples like here at Karnak, 500 miles to the south, if the robbers missed anything, there were always invading armies to come into the ruins and pick up what they had left behind. People like Napoleon or Alexander the Great, who made a number of trips down into Egypt, all of them coming in and essentially damaging many of the valuable ruins. Everything in ancient Egypt was valuable to the outside world. The Egyptians had cornered the market in gold and gems. A lot of the spectacular wealth that you see generated in ancient Egypt came from the fact that they had a strong agricultural product and they could sell it and trade it all over this region. They could trade with people who lived out in the deserts. They could trade with people to the south who were known as the Nubians. It was in that way that they were able to raise vast amounts of gold and precious jewelry that was then later hammered into a lot of the objects that we see and associate with ancient Egypt. The wealth was evident in the temples, but this was nothing compared to what was buried and later stolen directly across the river. It has only been in the last 80 years that we have fully come to realize just what the ancient Egyptians had done here. This is the Valley of the Kings, one of the traditional burial sites for Egypt's ancient pharaohs. Now, by the early 20th century, when Howard Carter arrived here to begin his archaeological digs, more than 60 of the ancient tombs had already been recognized and identified by archaeologists, and each and every one of them had already been plundered. 61 total tombs, so enormous, so spectacular, that even ancient grave robbers must have been stunned by what they initially saw. This was the resting place of the gold. British archaeologist Howard Carter actually began working here in the 1890s, and over a 25-year period, the artist and amateur scientist started the hunt for what he believed was a missing tomb. It was while they were excavating these known tombs here in the Valley of the Kings that archaeologists began to detect a cartouche from a pharaoh they did not recognize. They were getting known items like these on all sorts of objects, but suddenly an unknown name began to appear on these other objects, and that name turned out to be Tutankhamun. It was Howard Carter who believed that somewhere underneath the sand, maybe down the hill a little bit lower from where they were working, there had to be another buried tomb. That tomb being the one of King Tut. Carter's work was expensive, and he had found a wealthy Englishman to pay for it. Lord Carnarvon was thrilled by ancient Egypt, and he loved the pursuit of King Tut's tomb. But years of digging had turned up nothing, and by the early 1920s, Lord Carnarvon had had enough. He told Howard Carter the dig was off and that he would be spending his last season here in the Valley of the Kings. But Carter was desperate. He wanted at least one more shot at finding King Tut. So he traveled from here in Egypt all the way up to England by ship in order to speak with Lord Carnarvon directly. He begged for one more year of digging, and Carnarvon finally relented. It was, of course, in that final year that Howard Carter discovered King Tut. At first, it was just a single step in the sand, then a series of steps, then a wall, then a tomb, packed as the greatest storehouse of wealth the world had ever seen. And the great Egyptian archaeologist, Dr. Zahi Hawass, will take us inside when we come back. King Tut. There aren't very many people on Earth that don't know those two words. Dr. Zahi Hawass and I got a chance to go inside King Tut's tomb in the Valley of the Kings, where Tut's sarcophagus and Tut's body still lie. It is small, unassuming, and of course, one of the most famous spots on Earth. Howard Carter made the greatest archaeological discovery in history in 1922, an Egyptian pharaoh intact in his final resting place with every ounce of solid gold still here. Today, the three small rooms of Tut's tomb show a hastily arranged story painted on the walls and the only Egyptian tomb with its mummy still inside. King Tut rests right here under one of his 5 golden coffins, now under glass. Dr. Hawass and I climb down into the sacred site where Tut rests. This is the smallest tomb in the Valley of the Kings, the least ornate, built for the smallest of kings. Is it possible that Howard Carter pulled 5,000 priceless objects from a tomb so small, of a king so irrelevant, that ancient Egyptians barely even cared how he was buried? It turns out, yes, that was all possible.
It's true, because look at the tomb. Of the 62 tombs, the ancient Egyptians always use every piece in the tomb for painting.
But not for King Tut. Much of this tomb is unpainted, and what painting there is large and very basic, not the small, intricate hieroglyphs that are common to other Egyptian tombs. Tut's sudden death probably led to his crude tomb.
They had to make this a small tomb, put the scenes quickly, and the mummification process takes 70 days. And this could be the time, actually, they can bring all the artifacts to store them here and just make this quick scene. And the reason that we are saying that, there is not much color.
Brown, yellow, white, and green, painted 3,350 years ago, with no reference to King Tut's life, just a quick story of his passage from life into meeting the god of the afterlife, Osiris. That's really all the story says.
If you look at the beginning of the scenes here, it shows the people are rowing and taking this boat. You can see the boat is down here, right, and you can see underneath there is green indication of water. Above it is the mummy. And after that, look who is here behind you. This is King Tut, became Osiris in the afterlife. And in front of him, the high priest I, who became the king after him. And look what he's telling him. He's doing a ceremony called the opening of the mouth, which is saying, I open your mouth, then you can eat. I open your nose, then you can smell. I open your eyes, then you can see. That's exactly what he's saying.
Opening of the eyes, the nose, and the mouth meant that King Tut would live on in his afterlife. And thanks to Howard Carter, he really has. In a few minutes, Zahi Hawass will show us exactly what was pulled from this tiny Egyptian tomb. But first, we're going to take a look at King Tut's neighborhood. 61 other pharaohs were buried here before and after the small boy king. If Tut was buried with 5,000 priceless objects, what must have been in the tomb of, say, Seti I, 100 times the size of King Tut's tomb? Zahi Hawass and others are still digging through and researching these tombs. Seti's is closed to the public, so we made our way into it, down underground through giant carved hallways where Dr. Hawass is still constantly astonished.
The color of these scenes and the scenes of the Book of the Dead are impressive. Look at your right.
Unbelievable. And unbelievable that it looks like it was painted yesterday.
The story of the pharaoh Seti's life is laid out in intricate detail here. Under dark blue ceilings with thousands of stars painted in, Seti ruled 2 generations after King Tut. His tomb is typical of the Valley of the Kings. There are painted rooms, and there are carved rooms with no painting at all, just the carvings in the wall. We moved from these spaces further under the mountain, hundreds more feet down in. The rooms become even more elaborate. Stripped empty, of course, thousands of years ago by robbers that entered, but there is still a mystery inside Seti's tomb itself. It would have contained monumental wealth, as Dr. Hawass reminds us. All the other tombs did. But none of the artifacts that must have been stored inside this vast place have ever turned up. Not one from this tomb.
You know what's amazing about this? That from this tomb, only the sarcophagus of the king has been found. But there is no artifacts has been found at all.
Nothing relating to Seti I.
Nothing related to Seti I. And this is why I told you when I came to this valley, and I was in the age of 20, and this man met me. Yeah. This man was a huge man with a mustache, about 70 years old, and he came to me and said, I see that you are different from all the archaeologists here. And he said, I feel that you will be important archaeologist one day. I need to tell you a secret. He took me from my hand, and we stood exactly here. And he pointed to the other side. He said, there is a shaft here. This shaft goes down for about 300 feet. He said, at the end of this shaft, his grandfather told him that the secret chamber of Seti I existed there.
A secret shaft under this already deep tomb? A secret chamber that far underground?
Do you tend to believe that man?
You know, those are the family who knew the secret of the valley.
They knew the most.
And the other thing, where did the artifacts from the burial chamber? Where?
Did he tell you those were stolen way years ago?
If it's stolen, you should see one piece in a museum.
Sure.
No one single piece that you can see from this tomb in a museum in Cairo or in Europe or in America. Why?
So this is a mystery.
Then maybe this is a mystery. And this is why I would like to take you and do the adventure.
Let's look.
Okay.
I said yes before I really knew what the mysterious tunnel was like. We will go beneath the Valley of the Kings when we come back in a moment. This next sequence is something that many people find to be very claustrophobic, and I certainly did when I went down in the tunnels underneath the Valley of the Kings with Dr. Zahi Hawass. He told me that there were unknown tunnels that are down underneath Seti I's tomb, a pharaoh that lived in the King Tut era, 1350 BC, and a tomb that throughout its life has always been empty. And remarkable because of that. Nothing was ever found in there, no artifacts from that tomb were ever found in museums or any place later on. Hence the interest in the tunnel that goes down underneath it, because they don't know what the Egyptians were thinking or planning when they dug down beneath the Valley of the Kings. It's hot and humid and not a comfortable place for anybody that has any form of claustrophobia. I survived it. I don't think I would do it twice. Inside the tomb of the pharaoh Seti I, more than 200 feet under the Valley of the Kings. Inside we are under the spread wings of the god Horus, and the lion and the crocodile all painted on the ceiling, along with thousands of other depictions. We find the entrance here to the mysterious shaft that continues to go down further. At first, it is held up by bricks and beams put there just in the last few years by Dr. Hawass and some of his crew. This is dangerous work for any archaeologist, and it is the one place where Dr. Hawass feels most alive.
We are under the ground of the Valley of the Kings. Can you believe it?
No. I cannot believe we're this far under it. I can believe we're under it.
We are under it, and look, we are having this rope here. We put it today. Then listen, David, we can understand.
Yes.
How can we go? And this meter tells us how many feet we actually are getting in. Oh,
ouch.
That's okay. Okay.
Well, this is like being in an ancient mine shaft. Dr. Hawass, being the bravest of the group, goes in first.
I told you this would be the best film for CBS.
Well, it is, and I have to ask you because I have to ask you.
Do you have insurance or you don't have insurance?
We don't care about insurance. Do you actually trust this ceiling and this space?
No, because we did make consolidation here. We are holding the mountains by this consolidation. Then until now, it's safe. I will tell you when it becomes unsafe.
Well, please do. And we're just going down, down, down.
Down, down, down.
I mean, this is straight down.
I can tell you how long we are now. It's 97 feet now under the ground.
1/3 of the way.
1/3 of the way.
I like it that you love this kind of thing.
I do.
It takes a particular human being to love this kind of a thing.
To do it.
I would put myself in the category of liking this kind of a thing.
You are going to leave CBS
I don't know about loving it, but liking it.
and work with me.
That's right. I'll come and be part of the team. No decoration down in here.
No, what do we decorate? No, this is a shaft.
Yeah.
And this is the only tomb really that has a shaft like this.
Oh boy. I've never been this far underground, I don't think.
You never did.
Probably not. I mean, look at these boulders that they fell from the roof? Is that what this did?
Yeah.
This is all stuff that fell right out of the roof?
Yes, all of it.
Oh, great.
Then we can be buried here.
Why do you like that idea?
I know, I will tell you, when I do this, I don't care what will happen to me.
Oh.
I told you I live dangerously.
Yeah, you do.
Up.
You live real dangerously.
Yeah.
I mean, real.
When you're coming down, hold this rope.
More dangerously than I thought you lived. And I thought you lived pretty dangerously, but this is way out there.
Hold this rope in your
I can
hand.
sort of come this way, yeah. I got it.
Good.
I got it. All right, gentlemen.
Okay.
Come behind us.
Two cameramen, Daryl Kinson and Steve Simmons, roped down into this tunnel with me and with Dr. Hawass. It is not a place for anyone with claustrophobia. The air is hot. It is heavy with dirt. It is very humid inside, exactly the way Zahi Hawass likes it, because now we begin to drop straight down.
Can you do this?
I think so, but watch the beam over your head.
Don't worry.
Okay, David.
All right, then it's me, maybe. I gotta leave this here. This light's, or unless you want me to stay with the light, I'll try it. All right. I mean,
You know how many feet now?
I don't know. It's a lot.
It's
get-
189.
Oh, it's getting warmer as we get near the center of the earth.
But the reason that I really want you to come with me here,
Yeah.
because by the end of this year, we will be able to go to the end by making consolidation and restoration. Then you can make a story and say, I have been there. It's really
That's
true.
right. Now, are you afraid you may get to the bottom of this and find nothing?
I don't care, but I'm sure that the ancient Egyptians will never do this for nothing.
Unless they ran out of time or
they
ran
should
out of
be-
people.
They should be hiding something.
This shaft is getting narrower and hotter. We go more than 200 feet beneath the tomb. Dr. Hawass is now on the cutting edge of archaeological discovery, and so are we.
We are revealing, and I believe for myself, I like to do this. I like to go and try to reveal the secrets, because it's very important. I mean, for you coming with me here, you now feel the passion of archaeology.
Yes, I do.
You smell the past now.
Yes,
and
I
that's what I
do.
tell people. People write books and they exaggerate story that's not true. They never come to smell the sand.
That's right.
When you smell the sand, you can understand lots of secrets about our ancestors.
We have plunged into the heart of ancient Egypt. Dr. Hawass will go even further this fall when the bottom of this shaft will finally be revealed. The incredible discoveries from the Valley of the Kings all the way to Cairo are simply not complete yet. Dedicated archaeologists will continue on these kinds of digs, way underground, just to determine what might have been left. And as we climb out into Seti's tomb, Dr. Hawass reminded me of the adventures that are yet to come.
I still believe that those shafts and the doors are like stamp to locate the buried chamber that's hidden behind them. The most amazing thing that I'm looking for now, and I want you, David, to remember this, I'm looking for a pyramid that we are sure that it's there. We're excavating near the Step Pyramid.
Yeah.
And that pyramid dated to one of the kings of Dynasty 8 that lost his pyramid. And you will hear about this discovery soon.
So you think Khufu's actual unopened burial chamber still exists in this pyramid?
That's what I believe. I don't think that a king like this, to build this huge pyramid and just built his buried chamber for everyone to come and rob. This coming October, it will be the time that we actually will reveal the secrets of the pyramids.
More artifacts may be discovered even this year, but take a moment to appreciate what we already have. Look again at the tiny tomb of the small King Tut. It gave the world riches on a scale unimaginable, some of which we can now see in Southern California. The rest dazzles visitors in Cairo. Prepare to be dazzled when we come back. Now for what might be my favorite part of this entire program, which is all the artifacts that are located inside the Cairo Museum. We went in again with Dr. Zahi Hawass and got a guided tour taking a look at everything that came out of King Tut's tomb that is still held by Cairo, which is most of it, and a lot of the artifacts that came out of other tombs in ancient Egypt. It's breathtaking, it's spectacular. We're talking about King Tut's funeral mask, the remarkable golden object, and the sarcophaguses that it came out of. It is just more than almost anybody can take in, even when you're standing there looking directly at it. It is something that takes a moment to absorb. My recommendation is to take your time as you go through this, because it is just simply that beautiful. The riches that poured from King Tut's tomb in 1922 dazzled the world. It took 10 years just to get everything out and cataloged. The Cairo Museum now holds almost everything that was in the tomb, and it is literally piled in the hallways until a new museum is built here in 5 years' time. Many of the little things that were taken from the tomb are absolutely amazing. Like these little figurines, they were piled all around King Tut's coffins. Why? Well, it was 365 people who are represented here to answer the king's questions in the afterlife, one person for each day of the year. King Tut's beds are represented here, a number of them, and his chariots, his guardians who were standing in front of the tomb, and even his throne, a spectacular piece of work.
Look at the queen.
So even the hand touch
She
on the shoulder,
is
touching him.
in love and affection.
Looks like she's putting oil from that.
She's anointing him.
Right.
But look also at, he is wearing one sandal only, and she's wearing one. Then they, as if they are one person.
There are the mummies of more than a dozen pharaohs, the 90-year-old pharaoh Ramses the Great. Soon all these mummies will be closed away from the world's eyes, put back in their tombs back in the Valley of the Kings. The large artifacts from King Tut's tomb are practically incomprehensible. The coffins, the funeral mask, the sarcophagus containers that held them.
And this is a masterpiece that you can imagine how the artist did it in that time. The artisans of Deir el-Medina stayed a long time. Each one knows what he should do. And that is a masterpiece of art. If you think about his grandfather or grand-grandfather, Ramses II, if his tomb was found intact, what this tomb could contain.
Your mind almost can't absorb that.
Exactly.
The museum is an amazing place for any visitor, especially if Dr. Zahi Hawass is in the house. For anybody interested in ancient Egypt, he is just about as famous as the artifacts.
How can I spell?
Devan.
Our adventure is finishing up right here, an intense and exhilarating experience. But don't forget there's plenty visible at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and we'll take a quick look at that next. It is up to the director of Egypt's Antiquities to decide exactly what artifacts from King Tut's tomb or from ancient Egypt ever go on tour. That means Dr. Zahi Hawass has final say. And he decided to let these 35 objects tour several world cities this year, along with some even older items from the museum in Cairo. Each one has a complete, detailed account of its place in history available to you when you go through the LA County Museum of Art over the next several months. But it is the King Tut objects that will get the most attention. And why not? It remains the greatest ancient discovery of modern times. Only a few of the many things are represented here, and only through the middle of November. But if you're as lucky as me, one day you might be able to see the rest of it in Egypt itself, and you too will then be captivated by the lure of King Tut.
Go outside, look at their eyes. It's shining, their heart trembling. It will make every individual in Los Angeles to remember the time when we took his girlfriend. He remember if he was holding her hand, if he was looking at the golden mask, and looking at King Tut and his wife. That is really something that captured our hearts. That is the most important discovery. And this is why I say King Tut is back. King Tut is back.